Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 62. My name is Justin Young. It's November 17th, 2023. It's, less than 1 week to Thanksgiving. Joining me as usual is Mario Sanders, but we have Christina Ivey back this week, and also joining us for the first time after a long time of trying to get him on the show is Scott Jarmon.
Thanks for having me.
So Scott, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone? You're a PhD student here at SIU.
Yeah, I'm a PhD student here. I've been here for a number of years. Won't say what, but I'm here finishing up my dissertation. I'm doing a dissertation that's a little bit of a look into the crone or the old witch sort of as a figure across some different sort of texts, and sort of looking at this figure that has been around a very long time and across cultures. So that's sort of what I've been doing, and teaching intercultural communication at this point in this semester and next semester. So that's sort of what I'm doing here.
Well, intercultural communication is a pretty fun, interesting class. I don't know how the students respond to it, but there's a lot of different areas you can go to with it. Yeah,
it's definitely one of my favorite classes to teach in the comm department, for just the plethora of students that come in from different sort of majors and disciplines and all those kinds of things. So we can have these really interesting sort of conversations about applying some of these theories and ideas into their own sort of disciplines and their own sort of ways of thinking. So it's been great. I do love teaching the class.
I think that's always fun. I mean, as much as I enjoy our majors, I do like sometimes the class that's completely non-majors and just students from all over campus, because you do get that weird mix and different ways of kind of approaching and thinking about communication. And so, they bring in their specialties and their interests and their things they know about. So it's always fun to teach a class like that.
Yeah, definitely.
It is, as we said, about 1 week till Thanksgiving. So does anybody have any exciting Thanksgiving plans coming up in the next week?
Not me.
I'm going
sleeping.
But that has its own excitement to it.
I'm excited.
I'm going to visit some family. They live in the Philadelphia area, so going out of town from Sunday, and I'll fly back on Friday.
So will you actually go into Philadelphia?
I don't know. There's an old friend from high school who she goes to UPenn. She's a graduate student there. And so she and I have been messaging about maybe getting lunch or dinner or something one day. But other than that, probably not.
Oh, so you're not going to take this chance to run up the Rocky Stairs?
So I went to Philadelphia over the summer as part of my big baseball tour, and I got to see the statue and do the steps and all that then.
Oh, okay. So you've already done it.
Yeah.
So that's the reason you're not taking this opportunity.
And I'm not going to lie, I kind of was like, the Rocky statue, that's kind of a goofy thing. It's actually pretty cool. When you get there and you see it and you stand in front of it, I don't know, I appreciated it more in person than I think in the abstract.
It's that, what is it? Sublime Benjamin. And I don't know, some theoretical thing. I don't know. I can't turn my brain off when it happens.
There are some things that live up beyond the hype.
Yeah.
When you go see them, and then there are
the Mona Lisa, for example.
Yeah, and then there's the things that are way below the hype. So Plymouth Rock is that for me. As a kid, you in school every year around this time you learn all about Plymouth Rock, and then you go see Plymouth Rock, which is just a rock that they've carved a year into, and it's not even a giant rock. I was thinking Plymouth Rock, this jutting, leaning out over the sea and everything. And
I would have thought that as well.
Yes, and then you get there, and it's literally just this rock the size of this table that they have carved a year into, and you show up, and they're like, "This is Plymouth Rock," and you're like, "So, who cares?"
Yeah, so when I went there over the summer, we did the Rocky statue and steps and the Liberty Bell. And the Liberty Bell also, I'm not going to say more impressive, but was a more interesting time sort of going through like the museum that leads up to it than I don't know. I guess I had expected.
Did that inspire you to steal the Declaration of Independence?
It didn't. I think it's hard to not think about those movies when you're seeing all of these like historical sites, because I think I had come right from DC before that. I'd driven from DC to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So,
So you're feeling very patriotic.
You're really going on the the National Treasure reality tour. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Well, all right. We have a lot to talk about with games and everything, so why don't we jump right into it? And Mario, why don't we start with you? What have you been playing?
So I did it. Bubsy 2 has been played. And I gotta say, I've played worse. I will say the
Bubsy 1?
No, Monster Truck Madness on the Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
I will say the bar was on the ground, but shouts out to Bubsy, it cleared it.
I'm looking at pictures of this game right now on my phone, and I remember seeing this game. So it was horrible. It was horrible. That was what it was.
As people say, like I said, people talk about it as though this was going to be the worst gaming experience of my life, and it was not.
I think the thing with the Bubsy games is that they got progressively worse, which is like sort of like you play the first one and it's this very forgettable platformer for the most part. That first level is kind of fun because it's got the water slides on it. And then they made Bubsy 2 and it was, I think a lot of people view that as worse than the original Bubsy. And then they made Bubsy 3D, which is widely considered to be one of the worst games ever made. And it was like, oh no, somebody has to put a stake through his heart. They have to stop Bubsy.
Yeah, this looks bad.
I will say, I played the Super Nintendo version instead of the Genesis version. From what I understand, the Genesis version is significantly more difficult.
Oh, okay.
Because in the Super Nintendo version, you're collecting all the things as you go through the levels. And after you beat a level, you can trade those items in for cards. And then you can use those cards to either buy those items back, they all cost a certain number of cards, or you can buy lives. And so after beating the first level, I think I had enough cards to buy like 9 or 10 lives. And then it was just like every level was like, my goal was just, can every level be like net positive in terms of the lives I'm able to buy? And some of them weren't. There was one level that I think literally, I had like 32 lives going into it, and I want to say it took nearly 20 of my lives.
Wow.
That's how bad that level was. All the others were pretty fine. But yeah, I mean, like I said, this was part of that my friend's event that I know I've talked about. It's probably the worst game of the event, but like I said, shouts out to Bubsy for clearing the incredibly low expectations that I had for it.
Oh, I saw you on when I logged into Twitch and was watching some stuff, and I saw you were on. Is that what you've been doing?
Yeah, so
Nice.
This is an event he does every year leading up to his birthday, which I want to say is the 1st of December. So over the month of November, he'll put out a list of like 10 games and we'll play through them all.
Nice.
And so that was part of it. And then yesterday I was playing Super Mario RPG, the original. I've got the cartridge, so I was playing that. It's the first time I've played it. And yeah, that has been on the opposite side of the experience of Bubsy. That's been pretty enjoyable. It was interesting. So I had played it for some number of hours and then went over to watch the friend who was running the event. He was playing the new one because it just came out today or like at midnight. And there are some drastic changes. Obviously, like aesthetically, it's very different, but a lot of gameplay aspects have been changed, I think, that line up with what players expect in the year 2023. A lot of like quality of life stuff has been changed that I think makes that game significantly easier. At least it seems to make it a lot easier. Not that the original version is all that difficult, but there are a lot of quality of life changes that they've made.
There's I think one of the changes, if you do perfect timing with your attack, it will attack the entire group of enemies instead of just the one.
Yeah, and so I was talking about that with this friend, and he was saying that within the original game, there really aren't that many AoE style attacks, or at least not really any good ones. And so he was like, I think that's one way that they went about addressing it. The other thing that's new is a like group attack. So like your whole squad attacks whatever the enemies, and that also looks like a sort of depending on who's in your party, that changes the attack and it changes who it targets. But yeah, so it was interesting.
Looked like something straight out of Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have 3 party members and they're teaming up.
What was the other? And then I think the biggest thing, and this is what I think would make the biggest change in terms of transitioning towards like an easier game, is the fact that you can switch your party members in the middle of a fight. You can't do that in the original. And so the fact that you can do that it means that you can, Mario always has to be on the team, but you can change out the other 2. If one of them dies, you can bring in another member, but it also just means that, what I imagine what a lot of people could do is you could get sort of your support party member out there, get the whole team sort of buffed up, and then switch that party member out for somebody that can do damage or, send out a healer or something like that. And so, like I said, it definitely seems interesting. This sounds like a criticism. It looks amazing. I was not really all that interested in buying it just because I didn't want to spend $60 on a game I already have. But I was intrigued, and I have definitely considered buying it or using that last voucher that I have on the eShop for it.
Yeah, the footage that I've watched of it, I haven't played it yet, but the footage that I've watched, it's a really good-looking game. Yeah. I mean, like when they show the areas with lava, the lava's glowing and there's smoke coming off of it, and like it looks top-tier Switch games, like one of the best I've seen on that system.
I think the other thing that's a nice touch is they've added some little cutscenes or cinematics, like as one of the bosses sort of introduces itself or as you meet a party member for the first time, which is really nice. It's like I said, it's a nice little touch that adds something that makes it feel like, oh, this feels like a remake. It's very well done, very cute, these cinematics that they've added.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah, I'd say those are the 2 big things that I've played.
All right. Christina, what have you been playing?
So it's that time in the semester where I guess I'm
Alicia's not
Alicia.
here. You had to say it.
Yep. Where it's like games play a very specific function for me, and it's like trying to calm my brain down enough to go to sleep. And so the 2 games that recently have really been doing that for me are Tetris Effect. Just the music and like visuals of that game, I'll put on my headphones even though I'm the only one in the house, so that it's like coming straight through. I'll turn off all the lights and play it, and it's just like a really soothing thing, and I've passed out while playing it, which was interesting. And then probably when I was younger, my favorite game was Star Fox 64.
Okay.
And so like for whatever reason, that like nostalgia will sort of rock me into sleep. So those have been the 2 that I've really been focusing on.
Last week on here, I talked about a game called Whisker Squadron.
Ooh.
And so this one's Whisker Squadron Survivor, and then there's Whiskers. They're making another game called just Whisker Squadron, I guess. And it's very inspired by Star Fox.
Oh.
Particularly the game that they're still working on. But this one is very much a sort of like a run-based game, and you're kind of flying down like a trench and everything. But it very much still has that feeling. It has like a cell-shaded style, and it's like pinks and purples and like a very like set color palette to it and everything. So if you like Star Fox, like it kind of scratches that itch a little bit.
Nice. That's perfect.
And then the full game that they're working on later, I think will probably do that even more so. But
Nice. Yeah, because like when I had the Wii U and when Star Fox Zero came out, I was so stoked because, again, the 64 version was like one of my favorite games. And it was basically just a remake with some new levels and some like kind of like what Mario was talking about. Like the game looked a lot better,
Right.
But I was kind of sad that it was a remake as opposed to really any new content, because
Right.
it feels like Star Fox have just been remaking itself since the Super Nintendo days. So
Yeah, because 64 is just a remake of the Super Nintendo one.
exactly. So I was like, oh, I wish they would revisit this franchise and like really dive in deeper with some of the, I don't know, lore, story, characters. I don't know. Because, yeah, it's still one of the ones that, like, to this day, my cousin and I, who we used to be the video game ones in the family, like, he will just message me, do a barrel roll, and we'll go back and forth with the little lines and stuff. So, but no, I'll definitely look into this. It sounds really interesting.
Have you played Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube?
I was actually going to ask.
No.
That's sort of a weird, not real Star Fox game. But
So the GameCube is when I started college, and I was on my own, had no money, and so I feel so bad because everybody talks about how amazing the GameCube was, and I'm like, I missed out on it because I was a poor college student.
Lots of people missed out on the GameCube, to be fair.
Fair.
and that's the unfortunate thing, is even if you wanted to try and go back to it, GameCube games are so expensive. now.
Yeah. What would you say it was called? Because I'll watch it.
Star Fox Adventures.
Adventures. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go look it up and watch it. Like, I'm sure there's a playthrough on YouTube or something.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
absolutely.
Yay. Okay, thank you.
It's Star Fox meets Zelda.
Oh.
Yeah, it's more of like a 3D adventure
You like
game than a.
I missed this. What?
You like get out and like run around the ground as Star Fox. With
Which you could unlock that in 64 in battle mode, but but no, that sounds a lot cooler than this, because battle mode, no one picked on the ground because you were at a severe disadvantage. But yes, cool.
And Tetris Effect, I was just thinking about that game because I was thinking there have been like 4 really great Tetris games to come out like this last console generation. So you have that, you have Tetris 99, you have let's see, what's the other one? There's the Puyo Puyo versus Tetris.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that I'm leaving off of there somehow.
Which I had all 3 of those. So
Yeah,
I love Tetris.
But it's amazing because, like, you know, Tetris for a long time for me, as somebody who had it on the Game Boy, you know, and played an awful lot on the Game Boy, felt like one of those games. Like, okay, I've played enough Tetris for the rest of my life. I've probably spent months, if not years, of my life playing Tetris.
Yep.
I need to find other things to spend on my time. And then this console generation just really feels like they've managed to reinvent it in incredibly interesting ways, right? Like, because all those games I enjoy an awful lot. And like Tetris Effect is an amazing game.
Yeah, it really is. The soundtrack, visual, like, it's the perfect game. If you're having trouble sleeping, get you a copy of Tetris Effect and play it with no lights on right before you go to bed, and it'll put you right to sleep. It's so calming.
My only issue with Tetris is when I play it enough, I start dreaming Tetris,
Yes.
and I don't like that.
Well, that was part of like the reason they call it Tetris Effect is that was part of the like original thing, is they were like, oh, kind of diving in deeper with it. There's also been some psychological studies done where for folks who have just experienced trauma of some kind, they will suggest playing Tetris as a way to help sort of process that trauma. So it's like, I don't know, putting the blocks in order is how you're putting your emotions together in your brain or something like that. So yeah, but I get it, not liking it. I like it.
Oh, I like Tetris. I just don't like dreaming
About it. Fair.
You need to play it in VR.
Oh, yeah.
Tetris Effect in VR is a really trippy experience.
Yeah, dude.
So, and then it's not just, it'll be anytime you close your eyes, not just when you dream. It'll be Tetris in your head. All right. So, playing some favorites to like kind of calm down and everything because of the time of the semester.
I was going to say this time in the semester. Yep.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Anything else?
Nope. That's it.
All right. Scott, what have you been playing?
When we last talked, when you invited me onto this podcast, I was mentioning that I believe it was the first day that Forza Motorsport had come out, and I was very excited. I got the early access and paid the extra money for the special edition. I bought a $300 steering wheel, not semi-professional, pretty base model still, because many of them can get up to thousands of dollars and all of that. And the game is broken. It's broken. It's technically broken. It crashes. It locks up. The track just stops displaying, so you're just floating on air while you're driving.
Wow. Are you playing this on Xbox or
I'm
PC?
playing it on PC.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sort of custom-built PC, and yeah, it's baffling how bad it was. Actually fine for the first, the early access period was actually when the problems were the least, and then somewhere between maybe 5 or 6 days after it came out, it was just unbearable. Couldn't get into a multiplayer round and do some practice laps, and then it would crash on you. You go into single player and do something that wouldn't save your progress or lock up or any of those kinds of things. I'm really surprised it's not being covered more.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about this.
It's baffingly bad of a job, and it's incredibly sloppy. And they just came out with a major patch, which was supposed to fix 200 different bugs and stuff, and it didn't fix 200 bugs. Many of those bugs still seem to be in there, depending on sort of your configuration for your PC. So yeah, I a little heartbroken over that right now. I'm sure with a month or two more, maybe, fingers crossed, we may actually have a good, stable sort of product that you felt good paying full money for. But right now, it's just sort of just awful.
Yeah, I mean,
disappointing, really.
Not to silver line it, I guess that is one of the positives of where the industry is with those patches that come out, is the fact that there is some amount of hope that if a game when it comes out is a broken mess, that it can hopefully get to not being a broken mess. But that is still unfortunate, to say the least.
Yeah, that is true. It definitely just sort of really destroys that first day video game feeling of obviously all of us had an experience where we actually unpacked a physical copy of a game and put it in, and and it was good. That experience is more and more going away.
I would gather snacks and tell people in my house, be like, you won't see me for a few hours.
You shouldn't see me?
Yes.
Stay out?
Yes. I was like, leave me alone.
And now you just log out. These days you just get on, and all of a sudden you get a crash the first time you load up a new game, or, after a while. So, or you're just hoping, you're kind of worried the whole time that you're going to run into a bug if you just buy a game on day one.
Do you know if the problems with Forza are exclusive to the PC version, or is the Xbox version having similar issues?
It seems like there are some issues sort of across both of them, and obviously there's what I'm getting from in terms of the scope of the issues is from different parts of the internet, like Reddit and YouTube, and different comment sections. So I don't have the data there, but it does seem like there are still some problems on Xbox, maybe not quite as many, because the PC usually gets the short end of the stick in terms of development time when a PC port's sort of being launched right alongside some sort of console game. So that's what's going on with Forza. Put that away. So that was that was just sort of heartbreaking, but eventually it'll be fine, and I'll get back into it. And so then I guess the other ones I've been playing, I guess the two less interesting ones have been Hearthstone and World of Warcraft. Those are my sort of evergreen games that I consistently sort of come back to. I don't know if I have much to talk about there. They're there, they're interesting, and maybe at some point I'll go on for 3 or 4 hours talking about how these games sort of unfurled. But for now, I would actually say the one I'm more excited about has been Star Citizen. I've been playing that for PC. I don't know if I know you said you've heard of it.
We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't heard about it until we talked about it 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and then we went out and you had mentioned it.
This Star Citizen, the big $400 million funded.
Maybe even
online
more
shooter.
than that. Yeah. It's been in development for about 11 years now, and I'd say the single player may come out in a year or two. And
because they released that trailer, they said we're done, like feature wise.
Feature complete is it means they're now in the polishing phase, which can still take a year or two, maybe, depending on sort of how well they want to do it. I think it took Bethesda like a year to polish Starfield into the state that it was when it came out. So we're still a ways off. But then the MMO portion of it, we still I would say maybe 4 years, 5 years, maybe. Wow. It's a monumental. I used to say that the game was more of an experience because than it was a game, because you get into this universe, and there's no loading screens, and everything's sort of physically interactive, and you're in this, everything's really to scale in terms of being able to get into this huge ship and fly out of this huge space station that's like miles and miles long, and really be able to see all of that. But for a while, there wasn't much of a gameplay loop to actually do. And so it was really a technically impressive game. And then over time, they've sort of added more and more sort of gameplay features to it. But it still has a really, really long way to go. It's, if anyone has a PC, it's an interesting sort of. It's been in alpha for like 5 or 6, 7 years or something like that. It's interesting if you ever feel like you want to jump into the early access version of it, because I really think it's something that is sort of pushing the technical elements of video games to sort of new levels that we may never see again, because it's not really a great business model, honestly. I can't imagine Bethesda sort of trying out Star Citizen in this kind of way, or another sort of publisher that wants to make a profit and sort of satisfy shareholders to really sort of make a game like this with the wide scope and features and tech that it sort of has.
So this is Chris Roberts, who did the Wing Commander games.
Yeah, he did the Wing Commander. I never played those. It was a little bit before my time, but heard obviously some amazing things about how the atmosphere of the game, even for, I don't know, was it DOS or something like that? I don't even know.
Yeah, they definitely were DOS games to begin with.
And it really sort of brought that. I'm sure we all played Mass Effect here maybe at some point, brought that experience into like 1990s, and sort of having that sense of like you have a ship and you have downtime, and you live in this ship, and it feels like you lived in here, and you're in this world sort of there. It was a game that was probably what's the word, unheard of, I guess, for the time. And so I feel like he took like 2 decades of a break, and then came back and said, hey, I have a GoFundMe page about this video game. And then it made, $500 million.
Yeah.
And sort of changed the game a little bit. How do you make a $500 million game? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm glad it's not me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Star Citizen has really turned into like the ultimate example of the forever in development game, right? Like when a few years ago, people were still comparing it to something like Duke Nukem Forever, right? Like this game has been in development for a decade. Like, will this game ever come out? And now it just feels like, I don't know if I'll live long enough to see Star Citizen come out.
There is that. On the flip side, though, it is playable. Like I can actually go and have a good time in this game, even though there are bugs and there are servers that are really trying their hardest and sometimes failing, and a number of these sort of things. But at least we have something to sort of play in the remaining sort of 5 years before the game comes out, unlike just some of these other games that are just, you keep hearing about them and you keep seeing a story or two or a video, but you never actually get the product.
Right.
It's really interesting, and in this case, I feel like it's pushing boundaries in ways that we haven't quite seen in video games.
And that single player portion it's like Squadron 22 or something?
42, but yes.
42,
yes.
okay.
Who knows?
I knew I had the number wrong.
It couldn't, I don't know what the numbers represent or symbolize.
What's the answer for everything?
That's right. That might be it.
But I know that new trailer they released when it went feature complete and everything. They released a new trailer for it, and it looks really impressive from that. I mean, even just that part, which is really kind of just a first-person shooter mostly. I mean, it does have flying around portions in it, but it's not the like huge scale of the main game. It looked pretty impressive. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm excited to see that come out.
Yeah, me too. It's been a long time, and I think one of the exciting things that's a little less flashy is now that the Squadron 42 is sort of entering into polishing phase. A lot more of the development team sort of going into the MMORPG sort of element of it, so we may actually see quite a lot more movement on there. Maybe next time I'm here, if I'm ever here again, I can give you an update. Hey.
No, I'm happy to talk to somebody who's actually played it because it's.
Yeah, I may play it tonight. They just came out with a big in-game convention where they're giving away ships for free for like 3 days. So I get to go to a big convention and get a bunch of free ships.
So you're not going to NCA, you're going to this convention.
That is exactly why I skipped NCA. It's like IAE, which I don't actually know what it means, but yeah, it's a fun weekend in Star Citizen.
That's cool. I'm glad to hear like a positive firsthand account from that game because I feel like on the outside it feels only negative news that comes out about it for the most part, but like there's so many people pouring money into that game to get to $500 million or 600 million, whatever it's at now. People must be having a positive experience.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, nobody's putting that much money into a game that they're not enjoying.
Yeah.
And Bubsy 3.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I only paid probably like altogether like $70 to get into the alpha. And that's when you buy into the game, you're sort of buying the ship that you start off with, and then you can earn money and get all the other ships in game and stuff. But there's an unreleased ship that is $3,000.
Oh wow!
There is a released ship that I've walked around in that's $750, and yeah, these are. It's sort of weird because it's like it's much easier to just pay for them in the game and earn some money in the game to rather than paying, at least in my head, $750 for a ship. You know, just rather grind out like 20 hours or something and have it. Anyway, yeah, it's fascinating. I probably could go on, but maybe we have other news to get to and to talk about.
Well, I mean, we should definitely have you back sometime to talk more about Star Citizen. Just that game alone, I could listen to quite a long talk about it because I'm really fascinated by it.
It really is something else. It is.
All right. Well, I started playing a game called Thirsty Suitors.
I see that in the notes.
Yeah.
What is this Thirsty Suitors?
And so is this an anime dating
That's
game?
what I was just thinking.
So, yes, this is
Gal Guardians has turned.
it's a gateway drug, that Gal Guardians. So Thirsty Suitors, once I started playing it, I've heard like lots of positive word about this game. So once I started playing it, I realized, oh wait, this is a game I saw during one of the shows. I think it was one of the Xbox shows that they actually showed a trailer for this. This is a very difficult game to describe. I don't know the right way to describe this game. So it is one part of about 20 different genres. So there is a visual novel aspect to this game. So there is an aspect where you are talking and choosing lines of dialogue. And so the game begins, you are inside your character's head, and you have this so you play this Indian woman who is bisexual. And that matters because it becomes part of the plot and everything of the game. But like to begin with, you are in this like ethereal place where you are jumping on a skateboard and skating from like platform to platform in like this, sort of nebulous space. And this giant vision of this other woman is talking to you, which slowly reveals to be your sister, but it's your vision of your sister that is for your internal voice in your head. And so she is a like sort of weird version of your sister, and your sister at one point pops up and starts talking to you, and then your mom pops up and mom and dad pop up at one point and start talking to you, and then your ex-girlfriend pops up at one point and starts like talking to you. And while you're doing this, you're responding to them like you're getting these prompts like, hey, you go on a first date and the person's really boring. What do you do? And it's like, I cut loose and run, or I just tough it out, or things work out magically and we fall in love. And so then at the end, it tells you, well, you're this kind of romantic partner. So that's the intro to this game. And it's very weird. And like I said, you're skateboarding. So it's like Tony Hawk. You're like,
yeah, that's what I was just looking at. That's what I was thinking is it's like almost like a Tony Hawk does shrooms or something.
yeah. So you're grinding from one platform to another. So then all of that happens, and then you like cut to, you're on this bus, you get off this bus, you're back in your hometown, and now all of a sudden you're just walking around in your hometown, and you walk into this diner, and you walk into the diner, you can talk to people, and you can choose how you interact with them. So it takes on like this RPG element. You're walking around a town and talking to different characters. You go into the diner, you sit down, and your boyfriend from 3rd grade shows up. And he is hitting on you. And then your response to that is to dance fight him. So
that's relatable.
It turns into this turn-based role-playing game at that point, but it's very like Mario RPG. So you're having to time your attacks and everything. But the voice in your head that is taking on the visage of your sister is this entire time like arguing with you and like, what did you ever see in this loser? And you're like, oh, he's not that bad. And then you have to choose, like, when he makes hits on you, how are you going to respond? Are you going to flirt back with him? Or are you going to be mean? And so this guy's like hitting on you, and you're like, but in a very comical way. This is all done very comically, and like you're just being like incredibly cruel back to him. And so then you're fighting, and at one point the voice in your head says, this guy's really like putting out toxic masculinity. And you know what you could do to really like get the advantage is to send him into a rage. And so then you do a rage taunt, and he goes through this big cinematic and everything where he like rips open his shirt. And it's the most insane game when you're playing it.
Dude, I just watched the trailer on Scott's phone, and the ending tagline was "Battle your exes, disappoint your parents, thirsty suitor."
So I will say it's all voice acted, except some of the stuff where you're interacting with the townspeople. But like all the main stuff is voice acted. And the voice acting is amazingly good. So Annapurna Interactive published this game, and they've been really good about getting like quality voice acting into these games. So like they were getting like Bryce Dallas Howard in one of their games and stuff like that, getting like, known actors. The actors are very good. And yeah, so it ends after you beat him, which that drags on a little longer than I was maybe entertained with. But it keeps having unique dialogue as it drags on. So, like it's not just repetitive. But it ends with you defeat him. And so you make amends with him at the end. And he's like, okay, I've come to terms with, we're never going to fall in love. We're good with each other. And so then he leaves, and you go off. And when he leaves, he goes off, and like you see him meeting with this like sort of silhouetted group of people, and they're all talking, and he's like, oh, she's back in town. You know what that means? And they go, yeah, we need to like put an end to like, we really need to get our revenge on her. And he's like, oh, no. We don't need to get revenge. I was thinking we could all be friends. That would be great. So it's like he's actually changed, but like then it reveals that they're all your exes. And so like you're going to have to battle them all, which is very like Scott Pilgrim.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
Same.
That's what I just saw as I was looking at it. This is the game to play for Scott Pilgrim fans.
Yeah, this is the this is like the woke Scott Pilgrim game, I guess, because it's the Indian bisexual like main character in it, and it, you know, like what I've played of it so far is so bizarre, so weird that it just kind of charmed me. And I don't know if I can keep playing through it. I don't know if I'll keep up through the entire game. But what I've played so far is incredibly charming. Again, the voice acting goes a long way to that because the voice acting is actually really good. And I come from a background of remembering when early games that had voice acting was always terrible because it was like you got, you know, Bill from accounting to come in and do one of the voices. And this goes a long way in this game to making it something more compelling as you're playing through. And it's just so goofy and so silly that it just sort of charms you. And I don't know if it can keep that up over the length of an entire game, but at least that introduction part of the game, I was the entire time sitting there like, okay, I just kind of want to see where they go with this next because they keep going in the most goofy ways. One of the ways that you attack him and you like lower his self-esteem is you have your mom come out and yell at him. And so like you're like doing summons attacks like you would in a Final Fantasy game, and your mom comes out and she's like disapproving of him. And he's like, parents always love me. Like, I don't understand. It's just a like fantastic game. And you know, it's my understanding is that there are cooking parts of the game where you have to cook. And so like you're cooking like traditional Indian dishes in those parts. So, yeah, just like a neat game, like something we talk about on here a lot of times. We get the same types of games over and over. This is the type of game that you go, okay, well, like I've never played this before. And, you know, like maybe it has something kind of in common with Earthbound, and that's this goofy domestic role-playing game. But like it's also Tony Hawk, and it's also all this other goofy stuff.
Well, and then Parappa the Rapper with that type of battling you talked about with like dance battling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just keep going, well, what are they going to work in here next? Right.
And what are you playing this on?
I was playing it on PC via Xbox Game Pass. So it is on Game Pass. So if you subscribe to Game Pass, this is on there. You can play it free. I think it's worth trying. Like, even if it doesn't sound like your kind of game exactly, just to see it, just to see this, like, crazy thing. Like, at least get up and see that first battle, because it's something worth seeing.
Maybe every year there's playing some long game while I go home over winter break, and so maybe this will be a going home for winter break game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see it being really entertaining for a lot of people. All right, that does it for what we've been playing. Let's move on and talk about the news. There's quite a bit of news this week. First thing is, so OJ is not here this week, but OJ has talked about this previously. Mortal Kombat 1 offered $10 Halloween fatality DLC. So there was a fatality, a single fatality you could pay $10 for Halloween, in which I believe it's you like stick a pumpkin on the person's head.
You stick a pumpkin on somebody's head, and it's like a maggot-filled pumpkin, and then you fall down, and then the person kicks your head to a random like front door that looks like it's decorated for Halloween, and the pumpkin bursts open, and the person's head is there.
So appropriately like gruesome for Mortal Kombat. And apparently a lot of people kind of were annoyed by this and felt like it was kind of a ripoff at $10. So Warner Brothers has come out and said, well, we're going to give you 2 additional free fatalities with this to, you know, try to make the value proposition, I guess, work out better for people.
It's the holiday package is what I saw, and it's like a Thanksgiving themed one. I'm like, okay, great. Now what are they going to do with the turkey? And then the winter one that's supposed to be coming out soon.
So I assume we'll get something like turkey basting with one of the characters, and then I don't know, maybe something with a snowman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it probably wouldn't be Christmas themed. I'm thinking like a grandma got run over by a reindeer type of.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was thinking like a snowblower, like tossing somebody into a snowblower.
there you go.
I love how we're just like thinking about what are the ways you can die in the snow. Like, what are the most
Terrible ways.
Yeah, it seems like they could do a whole pack of just Christmas ones with what we just came up with.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Warner Brothers.
And they should do the Christmas Vacation one with the cat under the tree.
Yeah.
Have it, drop it on Sub-Zero and he gets electrocuted under the tree. Yeah. So I mean, this is something I think we still see arguments over, like, what is the value of a piece of DLC? What should a fatality? If we're going to sell fatalities as downloadable content, what should that cost? What will the market pay for it? Obviously, a lot of the market said $10 is too much. But, I don't know how much work it takes to make a fatality, right? If this is additional work they're doing after the game, they're having to keep people on it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you figure it's $3.33 for a fatality if you're getting 2 additional ones for that $10.
Right.
Which is better, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not a Mortal Kombat person, so it still seems like a lot, but, they're at least entertaining to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think the challenge is always, it's $10. That's half of another game in a lot of cases, with all the indie games out. So
I was just trying to think of, I was going to ask OJ if it looks funny on the Switch. Because I
think he did talk about it.
We did talk about it. I don't remember if it was a before or after, if it was actually during the episode, but we definitely did talk about it.
Yeah. I just remember like how bad that they were saying the graphics were, and I was like, "Oh man, wish I could see the pumpkin and maggot."
They said it was like a gummy worms. Like it was very polygon-y. It's not
like the version you're being seen in trailers.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that the main way OJ plays Mortal Kombat 1 is through the Switch?
That's the version.
I'm so sorry, OJ.
There have been rants on here from OJ about mistakenly buying that version and not realizing
It was an accident.
Well, it was a birthday gift.
It was a birthday gift, and I want to say they knew that it was not going to be as good. They didn't realize it was going to be that not good.
Yeah.
I think OJ thought it was going to be like Doom on the Switch, where it's a little lower frame rate and a little less graphical detail, but it's still recognizable as Doom.
Right.
And from the footage that has been shown, this is not recognizable as Mortal Kombat in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
So,
we see that a lot with Switch, where the first party titles are just amazing, right? Like Super Mario RPG, and then the third party titles, maybe 25% of them are pretty decent after an update or two, and then the rest of them are yikes a little bit.
And I was talking about Dead by Daylight last time I was on, and it's on the Switch, and I have it on the Switch. I will not play it anymore because it's just, especially after you play it on PC or PlayStation.
Anything else.
Yeah.
your toaster.
Yeah, at least then I get to eat while I
That just seems like I guess it would be the same thing with Mortal Kombat. The online. And Nintendo is not known for its online.
Yep.
Sure.
And either of those just seem like it would be really difficult to enjoy.
That's the most frustrating part about it is like I've done it where I've been sitting in the living room playing, and the person I'm playing with is playing on PlayStation right next to me, and the killer will be somewhere close to me and I can't even hear them because it hasn't registered yet. So yeah, it's frustrating.
And those are big games. I remember watching somebody play Mario Maker 2, like the race, you could like race through levels online, and you got certain levels depending on who you were playing against. It was somebody's internet, I assume, as the joke, somebody's playing on the McDonald's Wi-Fi you're watching a PowerPoint, with how much you're getting from like the choppiness of it.
I think part of that is probably 99% of Switches are playing via Wi-Fi versus in a lot of cases, certainly with a PC, people have a hardwired connection there. And oftentimes with an Xbox or PlayStation, they're also using an Ethernet connection. And so, most people don't have fast enough Wi-Fi at home to really get a good competitive connection.
Oh, I totally understand it. I think that's also partially on Nintendo as well. But no, it makes sense that the Wi-Fi is the way that most people are playing it, especially something like a Mario Maker where people are not playing that game competitively, although I imagine Dead by Daylight's probably the same way.
Mostly, yeah. There's really, Dead by Daylight comp stuff is really only... I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's only just now starting to gain popularity. And so, yeah, most people are just playing it for funsies.
All right. Let's see. Hades is coming to iOS as a Netflix exclusive. So if you didn't know, if you subscribe to Netflix, you can play all sorts of games on your Apple device as part of their game initiative. And now they're bringing Hades there. So, a game that was many people's game of the year a couple of years back. So this is, this seems like this is a free bonus on top of your Netflix subscription. So this is no additional cost or anything.
Yeah, I when I saw the Hades, when you say Hades coming to iOS as Netflix exclusive, I was like, is Hades being a Netflix show? I didn't quite, I forgot.
That would make a lot of sense.
I forgot for a minute that Netflix games was a thing. And then I looked on the Netflix game list and I quickly realized why I didn't realize it was a thing where, there's a lot of shovelware on the platform, and maybe at best a few niche titles that, some people like I saw Kentucky Route Zero's on there, and Valiant Hearts, where you play a little like dog in the military, right? Where you go through it and it's cute. But yeah, nothing. It was one of those things of this is actually seems to be the first sort of big, impressive title that is actually coming to Netflix games.
I think it's their biggest, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, kind of just a note there about that and everything, because we've been talking about this over the last, 2 years of doing this podcast, as Netflix has slowly dipped their toe more and more into this. I think the thing that a lot of people keep bringing up is this is neat and all, but at what point do they make that jump to where your Roku can play these games, right? That seems like where Netflix starts being taken more seriously, because, a game like Hades is really good. I don't know that I want to play that on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's limited to iOS partially because somebody's paying a lot of money for exclusivity. And,
right.
And then I think the other reason is iPhones are typically a little bit more powerful than your standard, just able to play Roku sort of smart TV and all those kinds of things.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
So you're able to do that. I did think it was also sort of interesting where, the gaming subscriptions that we're seeing in a lot of things are typically not doing so well in terms of Sony's subscription model. They just announced a lot of cutbacks. There's obviously a number of stories sort of following the story of other gaming services or publishers having to sort of cut things, and is even if it's a game of the year, like a 2 or 3 year old game, is this sort of the best thing that Netflix Games has been able to sort of snag as part of its platform. I don't know if that really bodes so well for Netflix Games or for the subscription model stuff in general,
Yeah, it's always hard to know, what is Netflix's long-term plan with this, right? What do they want to accomplish with this? Because they are dipping their toe, and it's, there's a slow trickle of games. They're not developing a whole lot of exclusive games. We're not getting a big Stranger Things RPG coming out of this, right? Which is what you would think. They're going to make games of their properties, of the movies and TV shows that they're making. So, where do they want this to be? Do they view this as just another incentive to get people to keep their subscription to Netflix instead of canceling, and coming back in 6 months and watching everything that you missed? like what's the incentive for them as a company? And that's been the question with a lot of these subscription services and people kind of dipping their toes into games. That was certainly the question with Google when they did the whole Stadia thing, and that flamed out really quickly.
I had a subscription to Stadia.
Did you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was okay. Sometimes it was hard to almost like the Switch and Wi-Fi situation, where sometimes games just wouldn't load properly, and then the fact that you have to have like the special controller and stuff sometimes was frustrating because I lose things. But I mean, it was a way that I played a lot of Division 2, and so it was a way that I could play it mobily, I guess, or like where I didn't have to be at my PC or at my PlayStation to do it.
Yeah, the cool premise that they pitched when they announced Stadia that they never got around to, that I always thought was like the coolest thing, was that, hey, you're going to go on YouTube and you're going to see a game being played, and there's going to be a play button right under there, and you're going to not just start playing the game, but jump into that game that's currently going on. And like that premise of taking streaming, to that next level of where, you could be sitting in your office here at work and jump right into a game for 10 minutes and play. They just never even got anywhere near that.
Oh, no.
And that was like such a cool, like futuristic idea for the way games would be played. Let's see. Caitlin Dever has been rumored to play Abby in The Last of Us Season 2. Caitlin Dever is, she did, what's the movies? Booksmart. And then she was also in the musical Dear Evan Hansen. She's done a lot of different things. I mean, she's been kind of an actress for since she was a real young little kid. She was on Justified when she was very young. So she is apparently rumored to take on this role. Abby, if you have played the game, is the sort of major role in Last of Us 2. So that's the setup for season 2 and everything. I don't know. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the game, familiar with Caitlin Dever, what you think of this casting.
I mean, Booksmart was really, she did a good job in that, and I thought that movie was really great. And yeah, Abby has to be on point in order for it to work, because she basically takes the like you said, the main protagonist role. I think it'll do well, especially because she's been acting for so long. She definitely, even though she's young, will have the maturity to take on a role like this, I think. To me, I think a bigger thing with Last of Us is going to be who they replace Ellie, is it Bella, with. Just because there's a lot of folks that were upset that because of the game's the time change in the game, that she's not going to be able to play Ellie because she's too young.
Yeah, they are saying they're going to start filming that at the beginning of next year. So, and I have not heard anything about recasting it at this point. Yeah. So I don't know if they're going to, or they're just going to go with her.
I mean, I hope they do, because I thought she did a great job.
She was very good at it.
She did so good. Definitely captured the spirit of how I saw Ellie being played in the game. So, but yeah, I think this casting with Abby is a good choice.
Yeah, I really like Caitlin Dever. I mean, I think Justified was probably the first thing I ever saw her in, and then seeing her, I don't know, she's got to be in her early 20s now, I would assume. But seeing her in something like Booksmart, which is, if you have not seen it, it's like one of those overlooked, just like really great comedies. Yep. It's in the title, but it's very smart with a lot of the things that film does, and she's quite good in it. So I at least like her as an actress. So I'm willing to see how she can do in the role.
For sure.
Let's see. PlayStation Portal is sold out. Sony is telling people, hey, we'll have more stock soon. So the PlayStation Portal is their streaming only, that it will not stream games online, but it will stream games from your local PlayStation 5. So if you have a PlayStation 5, you can buy this handheld that will only stream games directly from your PlayStation 5. It does nothing else.
In Wi-Fi, not out.
Yeah, with Wi-Fi.
Through Wi-Fi.
So we've talked about this on here before. We've all been kind of a little confused about like what is the use case of this, because it's a $200 thing to buy. So you buy the $500 PlayStation, you're spending another $200 on this. Mario, I know you have argued that like there is a use case with families where like people are.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the way I see it is if you have like one television, like I think about like in my apartment, if I had another person living in my apartment, and somebody wanted to watch something on the television and I want to play something while, but like we can sit in the room together. Like that's the way that you could do it. Or, somebody is watching something, it doesn't matter what, and somebody isn't as interested in that, but still wants to have, sort of the physical closeness, I guess. Like that's the way that I see it. Or with, families, there's something on the TV and little Greg wants to play, whatever.
Well, we have a lot of people, coming up. It's Christmas time, so we're going to have a lot of people watching the Hallmark Christmas movie.
Sure.
And there's going to be somebody who does not want to watch that,
No.
but still has to be in the room.
My stepdad and I, as my mom watches those movies.
And so, like, at least one of you can be playing the PlayStation via the
I was
portal.
like, no wonder you thought of it, Mario.
But, then we quickly move, into college football playoffs and
Sure.
then, college basketball and the NFL playoffs beginning of next year. And so you can see the reverse of that in a lot of cases. Somebody's wanting to watch the big game and somebody's wanting something else to do, but like be in the room with them, right? And this allows for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that was before Hallmark. That was the example that I thought. I was like, oh, if I want to watch the game and so wants to play whatever, they can do that.
Or if you want to do both.
Sure. Yeah, I guess, if you want to multitask, you could certainly do that too.
I have ADHD. So.
It's funny that this was on here because I want to say it was, like I said, I was up late playing Super Mario RPG, and so I was scrolling through Twitter, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I was getting the updates on Twitter, like Best Buy is going to have the Portal in stock or such and such and such. And so like, dang, we did not see the hype as other people did, I guess.
When did the PlayStation Portal come out?
It just came
Couple
out.
months ago.
No, it just came out. Like just
okay.
in the last week or two.
Oh, I didn't even think it was that new.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I
Maybe
guess,
it got announced, I guess, a few months ago
Right,
during
yeah.
the big PlayStation State of Play or whatever it's called.
so Sony really sort of touting that they're selling out of this brand new console that we don't even have any kind of sales figures for seems like it's sort of congratulating, just sort of self-congratulating. Is that the right word there?
I bet-
Itself.
There was probably a lot of people that were like us that were like, "Oh, what do you do with this? Like, this is not going to sell well. It doesn't make sense." And so it might even be we're going to announce this so more people buy it kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is I didn't think the cost was all that much. I mean, like it is definitely like you got to have, but like there are people that have that kind of disposable income. So I can also understand it from that point. When I first saw the price point, I didn't think it was as egregious as some of the other things that we saw. Compared to like PlayStation VR, which is obviously a completely different thing.
Right.
But because that's like I guess if you're including the fact that you have to have a PlayStation 5 in order to like really make a PlayStation Portal work, it's $700. But I guess I didn't think that price point was as high as I would have anticipated. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of people with disposable income, and games are important to people, and so yeah.
Well, it's how much is a controller? Like $60-$70?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's already that. So it's a controller itself, and so maybe people justify it like that. If like I'm getting another controller already, and I have a tiny screen with a battery, and
Well, and it literally is just another DualSense controller. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they split one of those in half and stuck a screen between them.
Yeah.
And I think the other use point of it is, I know you've talked about it with, sort of like buying and enjoying the Steam Deck, or like the popularity of like the portability of the Switch. Granted, you can't take this with you, but just the like lying in bed playing a game.
Yeah.
You don't have to have it set up to, if your PlayStation is set up as sort of your main entertainment system. I mean, since it does everything at this point, it, can do Netflix and Hulu and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
I understand if that's in like the main room of an apartment or a house, that this allows you to also enjoy that portably to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, because my PlayStation 5 is in my living room, right? But when I'm in bed at night, I'm playing Switch or the Steam Deck, because I can lie in bed and hold that, and play it. And as you were talking about with Tetris Effect, I can hopefully not fall asleep, because if that Steam Deck falls on my face, I have a broken nose.
And second-degree burns.
Right. Yeah, all sorts of injuries. But yeah, I mean, I see that, right? Like, I think the cost to trade off for that is a little too much for me personally, but I can't blame anyone else for feeling like it does make sense to them. So I think they'll probably be hard to find going through Christmas. So if you really want one, get on Twitter at 2 a.m, because apparently that's where you can find them in stock.
Small story point. I did wait. Back in 2005, I waited 14 hours in line outside of Best Buy for an Xbox 360.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I did. And then it red ringed of death on me like 3 months later.
Oh, God.
Like every single Xbox
Sure.
360.
Yeah, I don't think I never waited the overnight for a game console launch. I did do that. Well, okay, so I have friends who are still mad at me about this. And this is my nerdiness, when episode 1 came out of Star Wars, when that came out, some of my friends were like, we're going to do the camping out and be first in line to buy tickets and everything. And I was like, okay. And they were like, do you want us to get you a ticket? I was like, sure, get me a ticket. And then our friend Sarah wanted to go too. And I was like, hey, can you get Sarah a ticket? And they were like, yeah. And so then, like, the night of the film, like, here we come strolling up, and we're like, you got our tickets? They're like, yeah, we've been here all night. And I was like, well, you offered. It's not like we demanded you get us tickets. So I did go to, like, the first screening, at least locally, to see episode 1 of Star Wars, but I didn't wait all night for that. And like I said, I still have some friends who are better about that. And that's been, over 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
You don't get that as much anymore. I guess just hardware. Like, you don't get it with software. It used to be like when Madden would come out, people would line up and wait, opening night for Madden, like GameStop, would actually open their doors at midnight to sell Madden football, and now everybody just buys it digitally. And
That's how I got my Switch. I got my Switch at like 12:01.
Oh, really?
When it came out, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely remember friends that I went to community college with. We would go to the local GameStop and we got whatever generation of Pokemon it was, X and Y, I want to say, and the Smash Bros, the Wii U 3DS Smash Bros. We definitely did both of those for midnight releases.
I had a colleague at my previous job who one day he was like, you want to go to a movie? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go to a movie. And then he said, so are you playing the new Elden Ring? Or not Elden Ring, the Skyrim? And I said, no. And he said, oh. He said, well, I went to Walmart when like at midnight to buy it, and the other night. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. I thought about calling you. Then I thought, no, he'll think I'm dumb.
That's funny.
I said, I would have went with you. I said, I wasn't going to probably buy it, but I would have just went and hung out. Let's see. So we talked about PlayStation Portal, PowerWash Simulator, which is been a personal favorite. Hey, it's an amazing game.
I looked it up after looking at this agenda, and I was like, oh, there's one I gotta get. So no hate at all.
Alicia can talk to you a lot about it because her mom apparently works at a factory that makes and sells power washers. And so when we first started talking about this, she was like, I have a lot of problems with this game and its accuracy.
The type of power washer that would be used on particular
It's more
surfaces.
Simcade than it is a simulator.
I tried to explain that to her. She did play it, and she said, okay, after you get past like the first level, it gets much more accurate. But it's one of those things that I love about video games is you get somebody who knows like way more than you'll ever know about this particular
Power
topic.
washing.
Right. And they have a very strong opinion about it. So anyways, they've been doing all sorts of DLC for this, most of it free, but they did some for Final Fantasy 7 in particular. They did some for Tomb Raider.
SpongeBob was one I saw.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, SpongeBob. And so now they've announced that they have DLC for Back to the Future. This is going to be $10 for 5 stages. So like they did show off images of what those were. So one of them's obviously the DeLorean. One of them's
The clock tower.
Yeah.
One's the train from the third movie.
Is
Right.
it all 3 movies represented here?
Yes.
Or is it just
And
the first
then
one?
one is, I think the fifth one is the show that has like the
Yeah, it's the Jaws
Yes.
7 in part 2. They have the Hollow Theater.
Yes.
You know, the shark comes down and tries to eat Marty. So you're going to clean that. I don't know if it'll have the hologram.
Well, it does. I saw
Does it?
Yeah,
Okay.
once you clean it, it cuts over to you and you look scared and the jaws comes out and tries to eat you.
Okay.
That's cool.
Okay, that made me buy this.
I mean, it's interesting that we're talking about this $10 DLC that is 5 stages of content, and our lead story was the $10 for
sure.
3 seconds of an animation. You know,
Right.
Interesting there in terms of the value that you're probably getting for that $10.
Yeah, and the base Power Wash Simulator game has a ton of content in it. So, like, I've talked a lot on this podcast about it, but I'll just say again, like, it's a great podcast game. It's a great game to play while you're listening to something else in the background, audiobook, whatever it might be. And, you know, it's very sort of calming and relaxing, and you don't think it'll be a good game, but it's actually pretty good.
And it's, what, $20 of a base game, basically, too, right?
Yeah, probably
Something
now.
like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap, I think. It was on
I think it's
Game
still
Pass.
I think it's still on Game Pass, but
Okay.
don't quote me on that.
So, yeah, amazing that we're not just getting, like, different colored power washers for this game and, you know, having those be, you know, DLC packs or something.
Yeah, and the DLC that they did for free was substantial. I mean, like the Tomb Raider stuff, the Final Fantasy stuff was substantial DLC, and they gave that away free. So
And those are things people would buy. And I wonder if that's
Right.
part of it is like Final Fantasy, there are people, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, if they play Power Wash Simulator, they would have spent $10 on
For sure.
whatever you washed out of Final Fantasy 7. But yeah, and so I wonder if that's better. Like, okay, well, these two were really successful, so, you know, and Back to the Future, even though it's however old of a franchise, you know, there's people still really love that series of films. So
people my age will buy Back to the Future stuff.
I would consider buying. I don't even have Power
The
Wash
stages
Simulator,
looked
but
really
like
cool.
this is something that would get me to buy it as well.
Yeah, so check that out when that comes out. I don't know there was a release date. I didn't see a release date, but they have announced it, so it must be fairly soon, I'm thinking. Amazon has announced that they are laying off 180 from their games division and refocusing on the free games for Amazon Prime. If you don't know, if you have Amazon Prime, their yearly subscription service, which is now like $140 a year or something, that's what gets you the free shipping and everything through them. If you have that, they give you free games every month that you can go through their site and claim. And they have pretty decent games on there. They're usually games that are a year old or something, but like, you know, you can build up a pretty decent collection through them. They say they're refocusing on that. 180 people laid off from their games division. Obviously, Amazon has been making some games. They also have the Luna service, which was their sort of version of Stadia as a streaming service to play games. Though I have not heard anything about Luna in a long time, so I think it might just be dead.
I've never heard of it. This is, yeah.
This is a problem that people who are into video games, are not hearing from the biggest retailer in the world that they have this video game streaming service.
And this is, I mean, I will say just to have some personal connection to this. I remember, so as I was waiting to hear back from PhD programs, I guess about 18 to 20 months ago, and I got waitlisted to the ones that I'd applied to. As I was looking for jobs, a lot of like Amazon game within their game studio, there was a lot of job calls that were being put out for that. And so it's really, and there were a number that I had looked at that I considered applying to. And so it's unfortunate to see that. Yeah. I mean, not that obviously that's who is being laid off, but that there's these, I don't know, 180 people feels like a significant amount of people. Any amount of people feels like a significant amount of people, especially if you're that person. But it's disappointing to see. It always is, but.
Yeah, I mean, we've got another story right here we're going to talk about with more layoffs. This has been an ongoing concern over the last 6 or so months in the game industry, a huge amount of layoffs. And so when you start looking at it, right, like getting laid off from one publisher is certainly upsetting and can be, certainly traumatic for people losing their job. But the hope has traditionally been, I lose my job, there's other places I can go get a job. Right now, it doesn't feel that way in the game industry for a lot of people, is my assumption. So Amazon laid off 180, Embracer, everybody's favorite game conglomerate who just owns half of everything at this point.
Everything, right.
They have announced that they have written down 15 projects. So I'm not an accountant, but my understanding is when you write something down, you're sort of writing off the loss for it and saying, we're going to just scrap this and we're going to take a loss on it, but we're taking less of a loss by, canning it now. This is basically the same thing that Warner Brothers was doing with their movies, the Batgirl movie and the Coyote versus Acme movie we talked about last week on the podcast. So they've done that for 15 different projects. That's across all their different studios that they own. They say further studio closures are planned. And as part of this, it came out that 900 employees have been let go from Embracer in the last quarter alone. So remember, they went on that big buying spree, buying up all sorts of different studios, things like Crystal Dynamics. They bought up the rights to the Lord of the Rings as movies and television. So they're like working and video games. So they were working on making new Lord of the Rings games and movies and stuff. And they are now just, looks like they're a fire sale. Just everything must go. And that includes obviously people's jobs as part of that.
Yeah, it's a lot of wasted sort of potential with you're sitting on, I guess, with as far as gamers concerned, it's like a gold mine of IPs that you have that you can tap into. And I guess there was also news recently about them sort of supposedly reaching a deal with the heavy Saudi Arabian investment group and something with that. I feel like they didn't quite get all the fine details sort of finalized, and they thought things were through with that deal, and then the investment group sort of backed out sort of last minute.
Yeah, I think that was where all this really began with them. When that deal fell through, that's when the fire sale began.
Okay.
Because I think they were counting on that money, which was my understanding, like in the billions of dollars of an investment. And they were counting on that money to allow them to sustain and go forward. And it just sounds like they don't have the money to continue on. I think we've mentioned this previously, but it just seems like Embracer in the next 2 years will no longer be a thing that we're talking about. They'll just be mostly, disillusioned.
Do you think this has something to do with sort of the digital, I don't know what the right word is, the contraction after sort of post-COVID, where you just had everyone sort of on their screens 24/7 during COVID, and you had all this investment there, and now those people aren't there? Is that what it is, or is it just bad business practice or a little bit of both? Or
So my understanding, and again, I'm not a finance person, but my understanding is that a lot of these game studios staffed up really big during COVID, because everybody was at home, everybody was buying and playing games, and then also inflation shot up huge, both during COVID and certainly right after COVID hit and everything. And my understanding is, like, if you had money sitting in the bank, you were collecting less money on that, or less interest on that money, than if you just went out and spent the money. So that's when you saw the rush of acquisitions in the game industry, right, and in a lot of different areas, but particularly in the game industry, we saw a rash of acquisitions. Microsoft buying Activision is part of why that happened, because Microsoft was theoretically losing money letting that money sit in the bank. And so they were better off investing, buying something with it. And so companies like Embracer were able to get lots and lots of money from investors to go buy stuff. But now that inflation has dropped, and now that, COVID is over and people are still buying games, but they're maybe not as focused on games as they were during COVID. This is sort of blowing up in the face of a lot of these companies. And so we're seeing the outcome of that, which is lots and lots of people losing their jobs. So as we say every time we talk about this, obviously our thoughts and hearts go out to the people who are losing their jobs. That can be incredibly traumatic for people and entire families and everything. So we wish them the best. Unity has also said they will lay off staff in the next few months. We've talked a lot about Unity and their disaster, so this is the least surprising news story in the world. Unity sort of created their own disaster here for themselves. The Game Awards released their nominations this week. So the Game Awards are the ones put on by Jeff Keighley. They date back all the way back to Spike TV. So, the men's network, where they would get on there and have the Game Awards, and also ads for Axe body spray. So
I do watch these basically. I've watched these last 2 years actually. It is that, but it, yeah.
But they're pretty good. They are the biggest award show, at least to the outgoing public, right? There's other ones that are maybe bigger, as trade awards, sort of, but industry awards. But for the general public, this is the biggest award show in video games. This is the closest we get to the Emmys or the Grammys or the Oscars.
And I think for me, there's more gaming announcements in this 2 hours of programming than there are in a lot of things. And it's not always great games, but you do get quite a few good gems in there of this is a big title that I'm really excited to
and I think
see
that's
for the first time.
That's the biggest pull for people at this point, is knowing that there are going to be a lot of exclusive and premiere announcements at these awards.
Sorry, it was just a thought. I was like the people who watch the Super Bowl only for the commercial.
It is. I mean, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, people are paying Jeff Keighley to put their announcement into this show, right? I think at some point he's even kind of talked about that, the money involved in it and everything. But I mean, he is putting on this show. He does rent out a big theater in LA and puts on this show, and
and you have musical acts there too, which are really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into it, and this is his, full-time job, is doing these sorts of events. He does the Summer Game Fest. Yeah, and does this, and so Jeff Keighley gets a lot of crap from video game fans, but like Jeff Keighley's also like one of the best promoters of video games out there right now.
Yeah, I remember seeing him on. I don't know if y'all had G4 back in the 2000s. So yeah, I remember him on there.
He's come a long way. So they announced the Game Award nominations. They are, I believe, December 7th. Is that right?
That sounds right.
Yeah. And that will be streamed live online and everything. But I did include 3 of the categories on here just because I thought, or 2 of the categories, excuse me. I thought 2 of the categories in here were kind of interesting. There's, I don't know, 20 total categories. Like 7 of those are about esports. So depending on your interest. But I included 2 of the bigger ones here. So their Game of the Year nominations are Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And I just kind of wonder, what are your reactions to this as the lineup for Game of the Year?
I think my only disappointment in Game of the Year is Resident Evil 4. I know it's a phenomenal game, and I'm sure it is incredibly deserving of a nomination like this, but as a remake, I would rather see, again, I'll say it again, I would rather see like Lies of P get nominated for something like this than a remake. Mm-hmm. As good as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't played most of these, but I have played Baldur's Gate 3, and I have played Legends of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and I feel like it was a good year for both of these games. Mm-hmm. And I would probably be a little biased towards one of those winning, but I haven't played it.
I've heard nothing but good things about Baldur's Gate 3, from everybody.
It is. Has anyone here played?
I haven't played it yet.
No, I've been wanting and considering picking it up, but I know that needs to happen. Not in the middle of a semester.
Yeah. You know, if you like Baldur's Gate, or you like pen and paper sort of RPGs or Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that, I feel like this is the best game in terms of feel like as close to that as you can get without actually having another human be able to improv the things in front of you. You know, the choices that you have are amazing. Like my friend was watching me play just because like tiny little decisions I would make would completely change things, and so he would be watching a very different story being played out and all of that.
Yeah, I have friends who've played it and they love it. So I'm definitely interested in.
It's great. The characters are dynamic. The story is great. It feels it's up there. It's great.
A lot of what I've seen, and it's just again from people I follow on Twitter, a lot of people seem, from my perspective, it seems like the favorite to win.
It could be.
Which,
that's what I was thinking.
With how impressive and popular Tears of the Kingdom was earlier this year, for Baldur's Gate to, again, from my perspective, come out as the favorite right now is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It really just is everything about the genre done well and done correctly. You know, it's amazing. I didn't quite finish it as I was going through because some other game release came out, but I think I was playing through Starfield and was just always comparing it to Baldur's Gate 3 and just like, nothing here is as good as Baldur's Gate 3. It's just not a lot of things. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you noticed like Starfield did not get a nomination for Game of the Year, and
no Microsoft game did,
and that was maybe one of the most highly anticipated games of the year was Starfield.
And I think it's Baldur's Gate 3 more than any other game is responsible for really cutting it off at the knees this year, right? Because if Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't come out, then Starfield looks a lot better as an RPG this year, as like the prestige RPG coming out this year. And like, I didn't really love Starfield, but without something there to compare it directly to, maybe it by default like gets a nomination, right?
I would argue the same thing happened to Diablo 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because like the reason I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3 is because I was deciding between that and Diablo 4, and I went Diablo 4.
Yeah,
very different games, completely different.
Well, it was, so I was moving here this summer, and so it was like, okay, Christina, you have a month here. You can choose either Baldur's Gate 3 or Diablo 4, and I chose Diablo 4 because folks that I could play with people like that I
Yeah.
knew had it, and I'm kicking myself because I chose the wrong one.
Well, I don't think you chose a wrong
No,
one.
it was still great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that has really been the story of the year, and I think you're right, Mario, when you say like after Tears of the Kingdom came out, it was difficult to imagine that game not being the story of the year, right? And it was the game that had all the hype, and then it came out and it exceeded the hype for most people.
Yeah, it was funny. It was almost like, thinking about it, it was like, it felt, okay, this is obviously going to be a favorite for Game of the Year, but let's wait for Starfield because that's going to be the end.
I'm pretty sure we had that conversation on this podcast. Like, let's not like write off Starfield. That could still be amazing, and even Diablo 4, right? Like
Visually, Diablo 4 is gorgeous. It's so pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Diablo 4 quite a bit. I came from Diablo 3 though, which had basically 10 years of updates and new features and new and reworking of like fine-tuning things. And so Diablo 4 just isn't there yet for me.
And see, Diablo 4 is my introduction to the franchise. The people that I was playing with said that about Diablo 3, though. They played 1, 2, and 3, and they said the exact same thing.
it's the Sims problem, right? Every time they put out a new Sims game, it's like all the additional features, all the different things that you can do, all the decorations are out of it. And so, like Sims 4 comes out and everybody goes, but the Sims 3 is so much more. There's so much more you can do. Like this kind of pales in comparison. It'll get there 5 years from now, but it's not what we want to play right now. And I think that hurts a lot of these games that have that long sort of tail on them.
Yeah, Diablo 3 had like 30 seasons. And those seasons only started like a year after, or shortly after their first expansion actually came out too. So it's just decades long of a game development time versus these other ones. So maybe like in season 10 of Diablo 4, it'll probably be like right at the sweet spot for me to jump back in.
I think Diablo 4 will have those sorts of long legs.
Yeah.
Like all the Diablo games have. Like Diablo 2 sold for years. Like people kept buying it at Walmart in those Diablo battle chests and stuff. And so like I definitely can imagine that game 5 years from now, people still playing that game. I don't think Diablo 4 will probably be hurt that much. But yeah, I mean, it is surprising, right, to see Baldur's Gate 3. And I think you're right. I think certainly among like I don't like this term because what does it actually mean? But the hardcore gamer demographic, people who are really playing, everything new and everything. I think it's stolen a lot of that thunder, certainly from Starfield and Diablo 4. I think you're right. But I think also a bit from Zelda. And it's going to be interesting to see because the people who are voting on these are people in the games media. So these are the type of people who have access to all these games and are playing them all, right? Versus the general public who maybe hasn't had as much opportunity to play something like Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, I think both are good choices. Zelda or Baldur's Gate's those are my choices personally, and I don't fault anybody else for picking everything else. I've heard Super Mario Bros. Wonder is amazing. It really sort of a return to the art form of the 2D Mario, sort of in a way. But yeah.
It's an amazing game. I agree with that. Resident Evil 4, I agree, Mario, as well. That it's probably the one that feels like it least fits here because it is just a remake. It's not even a total reimagining like we got with Final Fantasy VII. Right, where it wasn't just hey, we're going to replace the graphics and everything, but we're actually going to make an entirely new game out of this.
And like part of me hates to say that because I'm sure people worked incredibly hard, and again, they deserve that recognition, but it's hard to see it over. Again, and I'll say it, and I say it about the next category as well. I would rather see like a Lies of P in there to highlight this smaller independent studio, a game that I think we've talked about it a number of times. Just as like it had this cool trailer, and people were like, oh, that's kind of a goofy, silly take on a story that people know, that has sort of blown people away. For it to not get that recognition, like I said, is a little disappointing.
So that next category that we do have listed on here, again, we're just going to talk about these. Unless somebody wants to pull up the other categories and has a particular beef on one of them, we can talk about that. But I also had Best Independent Game on here because this was different games. A lot of the other categories are, obviously repeating the same games. So Best Independent Game, they have Cocoon, Dave the Diver, Dredge, Sea of Stars, and Viewfinder. And, I like this category because it is entirely different games, right? Like these are none of the Game of the Year nominations, so it is an opportunity for these games to actually get some exposure and, maybe increase sales and everything.
Yeah, I know people were upset that Dave the Diver was nominated here.
Man.
Well, not because it's not a good game. I think people really like the game. But that the studio that made it is a subsidiary of a major studio.
Oh,
so it is like
gotcha.
Mint Rocket is a subsidiary of Nexon, which is a massive AAA studio, and so people were like, "There's nothing about the game itself."
Yeah.
People seem to really like it, and from what I've watched,
I really liked it.
it seems like a great game. But they were like, "This is not an independent game."
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And I want to say that one of the responses, what it might have even been from like Jeff Keighley or somebody like major figures, like, does independent more mean an aesthetic than an actual the publisher that's putting it out? And I think that all of these fit into, I don't know about Viewfinder. If I'm thinking of the right game, then it does. All of these fit a similar aesthetic that something like a Lies of P does not fit into.
Yeah, absolutely.
The aesthetic that these games would fit into.
Yep.
And so that was a big conversation that a lot of people were having about this particular category and Dave the Diver's inclusion in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the ways I heard it described is, what do we mean by independent game? Are we talking about budget or are we talking about vibe?
Yeah.
Same thing with sort of music too, and indie
Right, yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Right, like indie music used to actually mean something in the music industry, and then it very much did become like, this is a sound, right? Like in the 90s, like indie music was a sound. It wasn't so much like, hey, this is actual independent artist. Film did the same thing, right? Like it used to be you have an indie film, and now you have like, Searchlight Pictures, which is, I guess, Disney now. And they're putting it out. That's not an indie film. That's Disney. Disney owns like entire nations. Like there's nothing indie about that. It's difficult, right, with a category like this, because you want to recognize these smaller games. Even something like Dave the Diver, it's made by a big studio, but it is a smaller budget, smaller scale game. How do you recognize those? Because those games can't compete against a Baldur's Gate 3 or an Alan Wake 2 or certainly a Marvel Spider-Man where they're putting $200 million into the game. There's no competition there, and it's the same thing that the Oscars sort of run into a lot of times, where those smaller films just get kind of ignored when it comes Oscar time because they can't mount the big campaigns and everything.
Yeah, I almost wonder if you move into looking more at that vibe or more at that aesthetic. I don't know how you would sort of create a category for that, but like if you would change it to almost like a best 3D game as compared to a best 2D game, whereas as you're getting more of the pixel style art or like a voxel style art in a, what is that independent vibe as compared to, because you're right, like I'm sure some of these games are fantastic. From everything that I've watched of Dredge, that looks like a really cool game. But yeah, it's not going to stand up against any of the others. Or the one that we talked about, 2018, like as incredible and as happy as it made me to see Celeste get nominated, it was not going to beat God of War that year for Game of the Year or any of the other stuff that it got nominated, as much as I love that game.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. It's hard to do that sort of comparison.
In the Oscars, they sort of address that with animated films, right, by creating their own category. And I knew some people who worked in animation that actually made them mad when they created that separate category, because they said this probably prohibits an animated film from ever getting nominated for Best Picture again, because everybody will say, oh, well, I'm going to vote for it in Best Animated Film, so I don't need to vote for it for Best Picture.
Yeah, I remember it being like kind of a big, I want to say it was Up was nominated for Best Picture the year that it came out. It was one of those Pixar movies, and I want to say it was Up.
I think it was Up, yeah.
And it felt significant that it was like, oh, that's really cool that, yeah, an animated film is getting that level of recognition against whatever it was nominated against that year.
And not to say that animated films are the same as like independent games. Like, you know,
Sure.
those animated films can have gigantic budgets and huge staffs, obviously. But, you know, this idea of how do you recognize different facets of the medium, right? Because there are these sorts of, like, I think there's a category for best ongoing game, which is like their sort of live service
sounds right.
category. But, you know, that's a lot of things now. Forza is obviously a live service game now. Like, that game is going to continue to get updates for, you know, the next 2 years at least, right? And Diablo 4 is a live service game. Like, but we don't necessarily talk about those as live service games compared to something like Destiny 2. So, like, how do we recognize these games? And, you know, and some people have even talked about like the categories. So there's like a best action game and a best action adventure game category. And people are like, well, what is what in this? And, you know, in an era like that used to be easy, right? Like, action games were Super Mario Brothers, Contra, and adventure games were Zelda. So that was an easy distinction to make. Nowadays, everything is an RPG, right? Everything has leveling up and skill trees, and, you know, God of War has that.
Yeah.
But God of War is not an RPG. Like,
Yeah.
so how do we define games anymore?
And one thing that I will say, just to take a slight step back into the game of the year, I am really happy that Wonder is nominated, because I feel like when you look at all of these other games, maybe not as much Zelda, but like these fit into that like serious games type of category. If you're playing these games, you're more of like a quote unquote serious gamer, whereas Mario is a family game. Like,
Right.
that's a game that we've talked about a lot. Like, they have specifically made features in that game with Yoshi and Nabbit so that, you know, well, I guess it's not specific for young kids to play, but like it is an accessibility feature that makes it accessible to, you know, everybody or anybody who wants to play it. And I don't think that those games get recognized as much as like it's not as serious. There's not as intense of a game or whatever. And so I will say that, you know, that is one aspect of why I'm happy that something like a Wonder got nominated. Because one of the other categories that they know they have, I want to say, is best. I don't think it's best serious games. It's like games that matter or something like that.
Yeah.
But
that's really games that are like kind of reaching out on like diversity and that sort of thing.
But I know that they've had like those sort of
representation.
those like AAA games get nominated.
Sure.
That, and that's where it's like, that's another one of those ones where it's like, I think if you look at like winners across the years, you know, how do you, or even just like who's nominated against each other, I think I want to say the year that it won, or maybe it wasn't even an award that had like multiple nominees. Maybe it was more of like what you would consider like an achievement award, where it's more the recognition. Like, how do you compare a game like that Dragon Cancer to God of War Ragnarok that I think won last year for its accessibility features?
I think that Dragon Cancer did win the Games That Matter award.
It did, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
You know, those are obviously years apart, but it's like, yeah, there's just the ways that the genreification of games is really hard when games, and we talked about it with Thirsty Suitors, what category does that fit into? If it were to get nominated, what does that fit in? What,
I have no idea.
and so it's like games now check so many different of those genre boxes that I think that it's getting to a point where you do have to rethink or restructure the way you go about these categories, because genre doesn't really, games don't fit into those singular boxes.
Well, we talked about Tetris Effect earlier, right? And when that game came out a few years ago, it won some Game of the Year awards. But like, it is a game as game as a game can be, right? Like, it is Tetris. It is like the most basic game, like setup and everything, right? Like, a lot of people talk about Tetris as the like best game ever made because it's so simple and so accessible to anyone to pick up and play. And so, you compare it to something like Alan Wake 2 or Baldur's Gate 3. It doesn't have all the layers of systems and varied gameplay that those games have. How do you even begin to compare it to those? Yeah. Right? Like, it's more like experimental film than like feature film. Right? And in the video game industry, we have all of those kind of lumped in together, like competing with one another when it comes to awards time, at least. And they don't even they're not even the same, species to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, outside of maybe Wonder, all the others are very narrative heavy. Maybe not as much Baldur's Gate. I imagine there's a lot of like emergent narrative that happens there, but maybe not.
Emergent meaning
the players creating the narrative as they go, as compared to Alan Wake 2, where like there is a very clear storyline or plot that's happening across this.
There's both. I think there's both in Baldur's Gate.
Which is another category that exists as best narrative, or
right.
And so I think this is a good problem for games to have. I don't even know if it's really a problem, but like it makes games really hard to define or put into a category. I think that that's something that Jeff Keighley is going to need to figure out, moving forward, because it's like, well, if this game is in 4 different categories because it checks all these boxes, does it really belong in any of those categories? So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's indicative of the diversification of games. Yeah. And when we talk about diversification, it is not just who those games are representing, right? And that's important. But it is also the types of stories that are being told in these games, and also who those games are being made for, right? Like, Thirsty Suitors is not a game made for the Call of Duty crowd. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be any overlap between the people playing those two games, but it's just not made for them. I mean, I'll get canceled like Brie Larson for saying this, that some art is not made for some people, like at least not intentionally, right? Like
in the marketing department, they're not like, we're trying to hit these particular gamers.
Like we're never going to be the game that like every frat house on campus owns, right? Thirsty Suitors is not that, probably. But that's also like amazing and cool, and it makes video games exciting.
Yeah.
Because not only does that make it more interesting as somebody who plays these games, but it brings in all sorts of different people into games that, for a long time felt like they didn't belong or weren't welcome in video games. And that's super exciting to see. But I mean, I think the issue is like, how do we, as an industry, recognize that sort of diversification that's going on? Because we can all say it's great, but like, if those games aren't getting recognized at our biggest award show, then they're not necessarily getting the promotion that they need in a lot of cases, right? Like, that's the cool thing about the Oscars, is that the films that get nominated for Best Picture, people will go out and see those movies, and it'll be some little indie film that you haven't heard of, and you'll go, oh, well, I want to go see that now because it's supposed to be one of the best films of the year. And that's great for these games, but like, it's much better for the independent games, right, than Super Mario Brothers Wonder, which everybody knows what that is and has heard of it. Or Liza P, right? Like a game that kind of got overlooked at the time of its release and everything.
Yeah.
So lots of cool stuff with that. We'll obviously talk more about that when the actual awards happen. Nintendo had an Indie World showcase. There wasn't a whole lot of huge news that came out of this. I did write down just a few things. The first one is Shantae Risky Revolution. This was a in development Game Boy Advance game that they have now gone back and finished. It was never finished at the time and just kind of left on the shelf. And they brought back a lot of the original team to finish this game and now release it onto the Switch. Outer Wilds Archaeologist Edition. So Outer Wilds is actually coming out onto the Switch. I don't know if that's the best way to play that game.
Is that the time loop game?
Yeah.
I always get Outer Wilds and Outer Worlds mixed
Yep.
up, and so I Outer Wilds is the one I want to play. Which is no offense to Outer Worlds, but I'm always like, which one is which?
Because they came out like 2 months apart or something. Yeah.
Yeah, Outer Wilds. So the Archaeologist Edition is a Switch version. That's what it is, basically. Is that one? Okay. Yeah, Outer Wilds. It's great. I don't want to. It's like I want to tell you about it, but I think at least the first like.
Understandable.
Yeah, like you definitely need to play through one of the gameplay loops, just to kind of see what that is about. Because my gameplay loop was just calamitous, just disastrous. Just I fell into a star, just like a bunch of stuff.
You should go into that game knowing as little as possible.
Yeah. That's everything that I've heard is basically what both of you just said.
Yeah.
They showed off a game called On Your Tail. I thought this one was pretty neat because you're kind of this anthropomorphic animals on this little beachside town, but you're trying to solve some sort of crime, I guess. You're trying to figure out who this person in a mask is. And so it actually has you like going through the town and investigating different scenes and everything and looking for clues. So it just had kind of a fun look to it. And again, when we talk about diversification of games, like this is a weird game to be making. Like it's like they're making a Nancy Drew game or something, which I know they make those Nancy Drew games. So I can see that very much appealing to different people. Backpack Hero is a roguelike, but it seems like the entire gameplay is... So Resident Evil 4, very famously, you have to arrange items in your backpack to make them fit. So if you get a shotgun, you may have to like rearrange where things are so you can fit the shotgun in there. This is an entire game of you arranging things in your backpack.
Yeah, there's a streamer I watch who played a lot of this game, and it looks really cool. There's another one out right now called Backpack Battles. I don't want to call it popular, but it's popular. It's both basically that concept, and so it's cool to see this coming to the Switch because I've got a little bit of familiarity with it.
The last game I have on here is Howl, which I just thought this is a sort of strategy game, something sort of akin to a I can't think of the Nintendo game now. Advance Wars, right? Oh. Something kind of similar to that, except you are trying to sneak around and not have these wolf-like monsters hear you as you go through, and you have to plan several steps in advance your movement.
So it's like turn-based stealth game.
Huh. Turn-based stealth game. So like maybe sort of like Hitman Go, if you ever saw that or played that. But it has a really cool art style to it. That's what really stood out to me. Like all these games, every time they do one of these indie showcases now, I'm always blown away by every game looks radically different from the other. Like all the mainstream games all look alike. Like all the big AAA games, they all look, because they're trying to be hyper realistic. But when you get to the indie games, everything just looks crazy and wild and weird. And that's cool in the game industry to see that happening. So, there were some other games that were shown off. Those were the big ones that I made note of and everything from it. One last story here to get to, because, this is kind of a sad story to see. The Completionist, a YouTuber, his real name is Gerard Khalil. So several years back, he started raising money for people suffering from Alzheimer's. Apparently his mother suffered from Alzheimer's. And so Alzheimer's and dementia, I guess. And so he created an event where they would raise money for charity. That eventually led to the creation of a charity called the Open Hand Foundation. And over the years, they have raised over $600,000 through their streams and everything associated with this. They have brought celebrities on to these streams and everything. So I think Jamie Lee Curtis is one of the people that I saw from one of these streams. So this is a pretty big deal. 2 different people came out this week having done investigations onto this charity, and they say the records show that they have never donated any of this money to actual like Alzheimer's or dementia researchers. So basically, as far as they can tell, they've raised over $600,000. That money is still sitting in a bank account and has never been done anything with that money. So nonprofits have to file, obviously like forms with the government every year and everything. They're not taxed, but they do have to be completely transparent with all of their money and how they spend all that. So looking at the records, they can see that they have not spent this money. They have went to Gerard and asked him, and he said, oh, well, this was because of some complications, but like we've got those sorted out. But that was like 2 years ago, and he has continued to raise money and has continued to not actually give any of this money to the charities. And he has said that he was giving this to like universities for research and giving this to specific groups, and has apparently never gave them any of the money. It's a really weird story.
I think part of the reason this hurts so many people is he was a popular YouTuber. I know I have watched his videos years and years ago. I hadn't really watched anything of his in a long time, but I probably still like subscribe to his channel because every once in a on YouTube, because I'll see, a new video from The Completionist about whatever new game has just come out. And so I think for a lot of people, that makes it hurt even more. Yeah. That this person that they admired, not just for his charity work, but just for like what he does with games, that he has not followed through with what he said he was doing, but what he said he would do.
And he's the one who went on like the Wii U e-store and bought everything this year.
Right.
Spent like $30,000 doing it.
The Wii U and the 3DS.
Okay. Yeah. And so that was a big story this year. That was like lots of positive PR. Obviously this is what happens sometimes. Somebody gets lots of positive PR and people start kind of paying attention to them or more attention than they have in the past. And they kind of look at the finances and say, something's not right here. We should note that nobody has accused him of any wrongdoing with the money specifically, not like he's taking this money out and spending it on himself or anything. As far as they can tell, that money is there. They just have not distributed that money like they said they would. So there might be some problems as a nonprofit, as a charity, with setting on that money, but there's no indications like he is, been benefiting from this in any way. But I think you're right. I think this can't not hurt him. Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for news. So the only thing we have left is the big question. And as we head into Thanksgiving, I'm pretty sure we've done a variation of this question before, but we have a almost entirely new crew here since Mario, you've been joining the podcast this year full time. So the question is, what's a favorite game for the holidays with family and friends? So as we head into Thanksgiving, like what's a game that you like to play when you're home around your family and friends? Because I feel like people are always looking for ideas of what to play with their family and friends. So Christina, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. So I have like 3 different answers just because of the various groups I'm in. I always take my Switch with me. My Switch has Jackbox games on it, which for friends especially, like people love it. I actually play it with the graduate students too. Like it's just something I always use.
I played it with my students this morning in class.
I love it so much, and there's just so many that are fun and weird and like really interesting takes on like board games sort of. It's really great. If I go home, I think I mentioned last time I was here that like my sister and I would battle each other either on Mario Kart or Smash Bros. And so sometimes we'll pull out the old N64 and play those kinds of things. The third one is I really like to just watch people play video games, as most people do. And probably the most memorable one was I was back home visiting, and my cousin had just gotten Red Dead Redemption. And any of those games that have kind of an involved story, I think, would be interesting, like especially if you have a bunch of people who don't mind watching games. Just because, like, the memory that sticks out to me, one, is the ending, and I cried, and my cousin laughed at me, and I was like, shut up. But then the funny one about it is, like, he was galloping along, and I'm sitting here watching it, and all of a sudden this, what I thought was a rock, of course, is a bear and charges after him, and I almost peed myself because I was like, where did that come from? And so, like, just any of those types of games that have, like, a good narrative in them is nice, especially, like, for the older cousin. This is how I kind of think of us, to just kind of gather around and play through honestly just like playing through an extended movie, basically.
Yeah, I can see that for the narrative-driven games, because that can be entertaining to somebody, much more than, like, saying watching somebody play Mario, right?
Yes,
like, Mario is
exactly.
a neat-looking game if you play video games.
Yes.
But it's not incredibly compelling to watch
For
on
sure.
its own. Yeah. All right, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to mention Jackbox as well as Mario Kart. I do think there's a lot of fun in watching people play scary video games.
Yeah.
I have a hard time playing. I can do scary movies really easily, but something about being embodied into like a world, like Amnesia or something like that. But I think it really makes watching people play scary video games a lot of fun, and that's something maybe the whole family can kind of get around and enjoy. Overcooked. I don't know. That might be a game I'm sort of thinking. It's a little bit
really
of a
good
hard.
choice.
It's a little
That's
bit
a
of
good choice.
It's a little bit of a hard game, at least in terms of like maybe the initial. There's a little bit of a weird curve to it, I think, in terms of difficulty. But I
Right.
think you're running around a kitchen, failing at putting dishes together and spilling things and putting food out. That's what the holidays are about. So that's my choice.
So I've told this on this podcast before, but at the last Playing for Pets event that we did, Sandy played that game and then immediately asked me, is this available on Switch? I'm going to go home and buy this game to like play with her daughter, I assume,
really
or
cute.
maybe just her play. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's a great choice because it's really simple to pick up and play. Like you get the idea very quickly with that, even if you don't play a lot of games. Mario.
Yeah, so no one else in my family are big gamers. My stepsister will ask me for recommendations, but she's a big Animal Crossing gamer, and beyond that, doesn't play a ton of stuff. And same thing with
Disney Dreamlight Valley.
she might like that one. But this is gonna sound a little mean, but one of the games I had bought her because I thought she would enjoy it, and I think she does, but it's definitely not her style of game. I bought her Celeste because her birthday she's got like a Christmas birthday, and so she was playing it, and her partner bought it because he was enjoying watching her play. And so just sitting there watching the two of them play Celeste and struggle through it was so enjoyable. And it would just be funny because then like every once in a while I would get a text and like, oh, Jake just beat this one,
Right.
And it was funny. So I remember her texting me. I don't know when it was, but I remember her texting me saying like, oh, Jake just got to the summit. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I'm like, oh, has he tried any of the B-sides yet? And she's like, what are B-sides? And I was like, oh, you've got so much more game to explore. But I guess that might be my favorite game of all time. It's really just meaningful to me for a number of different reasons. And it's a game that I race a lot and speedrun a lot with friends. And so getting to watch them play it for the same time. And that's what I kept trying to tell. Like, I know the game is hard, but the story that's there, if you're willing to like kind of a lot of times just like bash your head into the levels until you get it, there really is something there that I think you'll appreciate. And so it's not sort of the typical holiday sort of like playing with friends and family, but there are a lot of good memories of watching them play that game and the enjoyment that they eventually did get out of it.
That would be an interesting game to like give to people who don't play a lot of video games, because that game does it does such a good job of pacing out the incentives, right? Like you get to those little spots where they give you a little bit of story and everything. And so there's this constant incentive to keep pushing forward. And that's such a great sense of accomplishment when you complete a level in that game.
And as hard as that game is, it is very kind to the player.
Right.
In like making it challenging, but like encouraging people to continue on. It's not like a mean hard, like, some of those, like classic style rage games. It is very like encouraging in like, hey, each death is you getting better and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, I really appreciate Maddie's approach to that sort of development of her games.
And it has one of the best like classic chiptune soundtracks.
Oh yeah,
I've
the
ever
soundtrack
heard.
is fantastic.
Yeah, it's just a great game.
Yeah.
It's like one of those games more people need to play. Like no matter how popular that game becomes, more people still need to play it. All right, so my answers have mostly been picked over. So actually, the Jackbox, like I said, I played that this morning with one of my classes. I'm like, hey, you bothered to come the day before Thanksgiving. Let's do something fun that also relates to social media and digital communication.
Perfect.
So I did that, actually played that this morning. And then obviously Overcooked, I always think of because of Sandy's reaction, but also because that's a really cool game to just give to somebody who hasn't played a video game, maybe not ever before, but like in years, like, the sort of person who will brag to you, I haven't played a game since Atari. You're like, okay, well, you can play this. It only requires basically one button and the joystick, so you'll be okay. So yeah, those are both like really great answers. So I thought of a couple here. One is a variation of the Jackbox games, and it's one that we've talked about on here quite a bit, which is the Riff Tracks game. So if you're not familiar with that, Riff Tracks is obviously like a continuation of Mystery Science Theater. And so they made a game, and it is where you watch short clips from movies and you fill in the dialogue. And they've done a ton of work on that game over the years. After it came out, they put out lots of free DLC, adding additional movies, and they have a mode in there where you can pick from pre-recorded answers. So like if you're not very creative, which is the complaint I get from people sometimes when I play these sorts of games, they're like, I'm not creative enough. I can't come up with good answers, and they get frustrated. This game lets you choose, like, here's 3 already written answers. You can pick one of those. So it makes it even more accessible in that way. The other one, because, and I've talked about this before as well, because in college, friends and I played a ton of this game, is Worms.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's great. Yeah.
And that's the sort of game I feel like you can play for hours on end, because the game, each match takes over an hour to play. And it's the sort of game that you can play while you're like, eating pizza or something, because you're not always on, you take it's sort of turn-based and everything. And it just ends up being like a really fun game. And it's the sort of game, at least when we played it, nobody ever got too mad, because you just it was always out of your control. The physics in that game are so kind of crazy, and you throw a grenade and it bounces off of 6 different things and blows something up, and that causes part of the map to collapse on you, and you're just like, oh, okay, well, this is just random in some regard.
I think another good reason for that is I don't think anybody gets picked on too much, because like you have like a certain number of units, like, oh, this person only has 3 people left, and so we're not just going to like wipe them out completely.
Right.
So I'll go after this person for this turn or whatever. And so,
yeah, and if you're playing with friends, you kind of want everybody to stay in the game as long as possible, generally speaking.
Which is probably why those games take so long. If you just like wiped people out, it would go much quicker, but that's not also the point.
Sometimes you do have that friend. Ours was the guy that when we were playing Smash Brothers, he would just stand on the edge of the stage and like hit you as soon as you tried to land. And he couldn't understand why the rest of us were like, "We hate you. Stop doing this."
This is a part of the game.
Right? Yeah. Well, if they didn't want me to do this, it wouldn't be in the game. But, you know, as your listeners are headed off to the holidays and everything, like, it's always fun to incorporate games. Like, it's something that you love. It's something that a lot of people love. And if you can do that together in a fun way and not a way that makes people say, we hate you, we don't want to play this with you anymore, it can be a really great bonding experience. I've seen that with the Jackbox games, particularly, that you know, it brings you sort of young and old and like all sorts of different groups together to play those. But that does it for this week's show. We will not be back next week because it is Thanksgiving, so we're taking the week off. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Mario and Scott and Christina, for joining me. And we will be back soon in 2 weeks with another episode.